Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Faisal Al Mutar. I'm the founder and president of Ideas Beyond Borders, an international organization that has been operating for roughly 7 years with offices in New York City, where I'm mostly based, and Iraq, in the Kurdistan region of Iraq and Erbil, and in Dubai. So we have been having a lot of operations over the past 7 years that really touch on the two countries that we work in. I will introduce the panelists here. Mansoor Ramizy. Mansoor is from Afghanistan. He actually was a witness of the US withdrawal. So actually, I'm very interested for those of you who don't know him, can actually know more about his story of that day. And Wameedh is an older friend of 20 years, and he also happens to be our country director in Iraq, and he currently lives in Iraq, in Baghdad, where both of us are from. And he can talk to us about what's the current situation over there, I guess 21 years after the war. So it's been, for those of us who actually have been defined by that war, for the generation who were born in the 90s. So for those who are watching us online, thank you so much for doing that. And I think please continue your support, and we'll continue talking about the book, which we recently published, that has both a chapter on Iraq and Afghanistan. So I do actually have one memory of the US withdrawal in Afghanistan. I was in a rooftop in an event with Roya Mahboub, who you might know. Roya is one of the very few engineers who established companies in Afghanistan to help Afghan women. And she was saying that her country was all falling apart, that the Taliban at the time was really taking Afghanistan province by province. And what I also remember is when she was telling me that, I remember that I also happened to know the assistant of Ashraf Ghani, who was a friend of mine that I met in Virginia, and Ashraf Ghani was the president of Afghanistan during the withdrawal. And what I was telling her, I was like, I'm hearing in news that Afghanistan is falling apart, and she accused me of spreading fake news that Afghanistan is falling apart.
Where is she now?
So in Virginia, which actually tells you. So she was telling me. So I was on the phone, and I was like, I have to check, knowing that I have a source of actually somebody who works with the president of Afghanistan. I want to check off what's going on, and she was telling me a completely different story about that nothing is happening, and Kabul is everything under control, and all of that. So it was really like two different realities of seeing what was, I guess, on the social media and the internet, of really seeing the whole country falling apart, and seeing the president of Afghanistan at the time, Ashraf Ghani's assistant, was telling me nothing is happening. So, which reminded me actually of the Iraq war time when we were in Baghdad and we were told that the Aluj and the Americans are being defeated in the south, and then we wake up and then we see the American tanks in front of our house. So I think that's I think what the connection. But you were there, so tell us what happened, and then we can move forward to 3 years later.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for showing up here. It's really an honor and privilege to have everybody here, and of course, you guys. I think the story goes back to Afghanistan and the war and the civil jihad that started way back before the Taliban that we know right now and today. This goes back to the Soviet times, and during the Soviet era, when Afghanistan faced the brutality of the Soviets in a different format, of course. In one way, they were helping Afghans. They were helping trying to find their way towards the south, towards the expansion of their borders in the south. Obviously, taking Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and then overtaking Afghanistan by firstly installing their own people inside the military, and then slowly overtaking the country through military coups d'etats and affiliates of the Soviets. Shortly after that, the Afghan people became tired and bored of the brutality of the Soviets, which was existent at the time. It was an honest cause at the time to stop the Soviets and the spread of communism in Afghanistan, and then further down south, which started the jihad in Afghanistan, and the Mujahideen started forming different groups. In the south, the Taliban started forming, and then in the north, the Northern Alliance started forming. And I think
Just actually a moment of clarification. Which I said something I learned also about Afghanistan is that when you say the word mujahideen, it encompasses all of the rebel forces, right? You don't actually mean only the Islamic State or the. So the mujahideen in Afghanistan doesn't mean, as we mostly call mujahideen back in Iraq, which was only the Islamic terrorist groups. That actually included all of the umbrella of all of the different factions.
Absolutely. This was an all-encompassing term used for all the rebel forces against the Soviet Union, practically. And they overthrew the government, the Soviet government, of course, but what happened was, obviously they were backed by the US, and CIA helped them out with all the Stinger missiles and all the equipment that helped them take down the MiGs and the Soviet gunships. But what happened was that they left everything behind with no consequence, with no worry about what's going to happen afterwards, and that led to the civil war in Afghanistan, which saw the usage of all that billions of dollars of aid and equipment inside Afghanistan, military equipment, being used towards each other, because Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic country. We have different ethnicities. We have Tajiks, Pashtuns, Uzbeks, Hazaras, and everybody wanted a share of the power, naturally. And that caused that crack in between the country. And the Taliban saw an opportunity in here to come step forward and try to save Afghanistan and try to be the salvation for the people. That's how the first regime of the Taliban started to roll in. But quickly we noticed that this is not the Taliban's main agenda. They want to have firm control in the country, and they want to start their own ideology, and they want to have the strict interpretation of jurisprudence and Sharia law, which is authoritarian, which is extreme, which is radical. And we saw during the dark ages of Afghanistan, during the 5-6 year period that the Taliban were in Afghanistan, we saw brutalities of the Taliban. Shortly after 9/11, of course, we saw the return of a democratic republic in Afghanistan through the help of the United States and their intervention in Afghanistan, which opened up a lot of opportunities for Afghans, such as myself, that was somebody who was born shortly after 9/11 in Afghanistan. We were able to get accustomed with the West, with materials from the West, with ideologies, with different concepts, with the internet, with cell phone, with technology, with science, literature, and everything else that was totally blocked and totally censored in Afghanistan during that period of time, during the Taliban regime. And we got a taste of that, and we enjoyed that. We enjoyed the freedom, we enjoyed the liberty, the somewhat liberty that we had in Afghanistan, which was substantial at the time, considerably more than Iran or Pakistan, for example, our neighboring countries. And that enabled us to actually develop a sense of unity, a sense of national pride, start rebuilding the country, and move towards a better Afghanistan, a better future. Despite all the challenges in Afghanistan during the past 20-something years with the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, we still were able to do some good in the country, at least. But then, during 2015 and 2016, talks behind doors started to form when the Taliban opened up their political representation in Doha, in Qatar. And then they started coming to the negotiation tables in order to, this started out as small talk, mostly with the United Nations and with other international organizations, in terms of allowing, for example, vaccinations to happen in their territories, in order to allow humanitarian aid to go towards their territories and things like that. They were against this, of course. And slowly after that, the negotiations started to take pace, and then they started to bring in governments, they started to bring in other republics in there, and then other players, in order to have a solution for Afghanistan. Because we couldn't continue this back and forth war in Afghanistan, the Taliban taking a province, and then the Afghan forces going back again, and then them losing territory again, and then us going back again. So they started the discussions, in which we are all familiar with, the Doha negotiations, and run by Mr. Khalilzad, the representative, the envoy from the United States. And eventually the country was, in a way, as the perception is in Afghanistan with the people, was handed over to the Taliban.
I mean, I'm sure some of the people will have. Why did the United States, and I guess Canada was also involved in negotiations too, why did they bypass the whole Afghan government?
That's
Like, why did the U.S. negotiate directly with the Taliban and bypass the whole government that they have technically built over the past 20 years?
exactly. That's a question we ask ourselves. It's it is no we can't hide the fact that the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, the previous Democratic Republic, was placed in there through the help of the international community, in specific the United States. The Taliban called the Afghan government a puppet regime because of the fact that they thought it's the U.S. and the CIA that actually runs the government and actually runs this whole administration. It's not actually the people. It's not democratic. That's what they believed in, and I think in a way the United States did have a bigger say in this, because despite what the people were trying to force onto the United States and the envoy, Mr. Khalilzad, and despite what how the government was being pressured by the people to come to the negotiating table, they were unable to actually do that with the United States. The United States always had the first say, and the Taliban actually rejected talking to the Afghan government, because the Taliban believed that the United States placed this administration in power. So they were like, we're actually going to talk to the grown-ups. We're not going to talk to you, the administration, which is a puppet regime. So that's how they saw these negotiations going in. That's why the United Nations was there as an observer, and then the actual discussions happened between the United States and the Taliban. And eventually we saw that the deal happened, and the United States, the Taliban in a way agreed that Afghanistan will not be used again for Al-Qaeda training grounds and for other terrorist networks training grounds, and a safe haven for all these other organizations to freely roam around and have a chance to plan out their attacks against the United States or Western allies from Afghanistan. And that deal was in place, which enabled the Americans to eventually exit and leave Afghanistan, which kind of demoralized the people. But in a way, we still were being funded by the United States. We still had armaments shipments coming in for gas, for resources, for ammo, for ammunition. Everything was coming in, and the people had the will to fight. But eventually, things started to break down once the Taliban started to gain momentum, and then province after province, and then city after city started to collapse and mostly surrendered to the Taliban, eventually causing, coming to this day, to August 15th, where we saw the actual capital, Kabul city, being overrun by the Taliban forces, because the Afghan government fled the country. The president fled the country, and then the administration fled the country.
Which I get the message
left
like
an empty gap.
48 hours later, after being accused of spreading fake news, is that the person now is in Tajikistan and asking to be shipped to Virginia. I mean, we've had, I would say, and by we I mean in Iraq, we've had a similar but kind of different situation with ISIS. And I know you have comments about what's happening now and opening remarks. So Wameedh, take the lead.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. I want to talk about ISIS because we suffered from ISIS for so many years. In 2013, ISIS easily occupied a third of Iraq due to several reasons. In my opinion, the most important one was the presence of an incubating environment for this radical group, resulted from a long term of persecution against the Sunnis after the fall of Saddam's regime during the rule of Noor al-Maliki, who was the prime minister at that time. So the former prime minister of Iraq was named Noor al-Maliki. At his time, ISIS could occupy a third of Iraq, and the Iraqi army at al-Maliki time practiced the harshest type of violence and disrespecting for the purpose of revenge against the Sunnis in that region. This behavior practiced by the government toward the Sunnis provided a receptive environment to the radical organizations to occupy these territories. So now the Sunni cities are almost ISIS-free, except some of sleeper cells, which is still remain in that place. And but the problem is their political situation of Sunni cities. Now they are suffering more than before ISIS, and it's worse than before, due to the removal of the former speaker of the House of Representatives, his name is Muhammad al-Halbousi. They kicked him out from the presidency of the parliament, or as a speaker of the parliament. And now they are keeping the position vacant. Currently, the Iraqi parliament is run by Shia and by a person of Iranian origin. His name is Muhsin al-Mandelawi, Muhsin Ali Akbar Mandelawi, which he is from Iran. And he's pretending, or he's saying that he's half Irani, half Iraqi, but now he's the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So there are no senior positions left for Sunnis, Arabs, as a President of Republic, or Prime Minister, or Speaker of the Parliament, or anything else, or the court, or whatever. So this is why there is anger on the part of Sunni public people and a feeling of marginalization. ISIS was able to occupy a third of Iraq because of people of these Sunni cities wanted any change could take a place. So that's why they provided a good environment to accept terrorist groups. That's why ISIS could occupy third of Iraq. So whatever is the change, they will accept it. That's what happened in 2013. And I'm afraid this might happen again if they feel like they are not welcomed in their country and they are not participating in politics and being a part of the country. That's why ISIS was able to take control easily. I fear that current political marginalization of the Sunnis could lead to providing an incubating environment for the emergence of new radical movements or the emergence of new ISIS again. The situation in Iraq is different from the situation in Afghanistan, Libya, Sudan, and other countries which are suffering from problems, which are experiencing like internal conflicts, army conflicts inside their countries. Because so far, Iraq is committed to electoral competition and adopts a democratic system that cannot be said it's ideal, but it's close to called a democracy. And the political parties in Iraq are established on a sectarian or religious and ethnic basis, not on intellectual or ideological or any kind of different basics. So therefore, each party in Iraq leans toward a specific country in the region, and these parties emerged and act based on the desire of other countries that neighboring Iraq or they controlling the region. And the other countries that sponsoring these parties, so they are sharing interests with these parties, and these parties are far away from being national or patriotic or any kind of that. They don't think about Iraq, they think about only the benefit of their allies like Iran, Saudi Arabia, or whatever country they belong to. So currently, Iraq basic problems can be summarized in 3 points, in my opinion. The first one is the danger of the return of ISIS, and this might be, I don't think it could be now, but it's possible because of the situation. Second is the Iranian influence inside Iraq and the presence of Iranian agents who do not allow the existence of a strong law and disrupt the Iraqi economy for the sake of Iranians' interest. Iraq imported materials and goods and whatever worth $12 billion from Iran in 2023, and 6 billions out of this 12 billions was to buy gas from Iran to generate electricity. Despite Iraq being a self-sufficient in gas, if we invested our off gas that is associated with the extracting oil from the wells, oil wells, and we don't burn it, because nowadays Iraq is burning gas and for Iran to buy from Iran for $6 billion. And the third and the most dangerous point, in my opinion, is the Iraqi people have a weak confidence in the democracy. This is what makes me feel that the risk of internal war is possible. Because of the democratic system was inability to protect itself, and because of the weakness of legalization, so they didn't vote for new rules to protect the system, and lack of laws voted on by the parliament. In 2021, in Iraq, we had parliamentary elections, which took place in that time, and less than 9 million people out of 42 nowadays, the population of Iraq. So 9 million people only, or less. They were about 8.8 million. So they went to vote for the parliament, and less than voted in these elections, and now Iraq is ruled by parties linked to Iran. Those parties didn't receive more than 1.5 million votes out of 9 million votes the other Iraqis voted. And they are practicing individual ruling and excluding the other parties. And there is multiple parties participated in that elections, like liberal parties or Tashrin parties, which they gained about 1.6 million votes, and Al-Sadr, who gained almost 700 something votes, and now they are all out of the game. Even Kurds and Sunnis are out of the game, and only parties are proxy to Iran. Now they are ruling Iraq. So Iraq is suffering from different things, but not like the other countries. It's look like a soft things. It doesn't seem like a war is coming, but there is a precursor for everything, and I think this is a precursor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I mean, one thing that I guess everybody is talking about right now is that the Sudani Prime Minister is the best thing we can ever have. Is that him trying to balance between US on one side and Iran on the other, and we cannot have anything better than that. What's your response to?
I think it's hard for him to handle the American and Iranian well, and be in the middle, playing on the rope, walking between two different needs. This is very hard to handle, but he is not a great man. He did only some bridges, he paved the highway, and that's only what he did. Where the Iraqi government nowadays is suffering from extra corruption more than before. So even in some ministries, the corruption was not high like now. And they are trying to steal everything they can steal because Asa'ib al-Haq, which they are a terrorist group, and nowadays they are controlling the prime minister in Iraq, and they are controlling all the ministries in Iraq. So Sudani is not good guy. He's not better than Mustafa al-Kadhimi. He's not better than al-Abadi, and I think he's worse. He's not dealing with the political problems. He's abusing freedom of expression. Some of people working in media went to jail because they talked about him. They talked badly about him. So we have so many problems. And Sudani, I don't think he's...
I mean, one of the, I guess, I've been living for 11 years in the States, and by being so close to Washington, D.C., I get to meet with a lot of Western officials over the time and ambassadors and all of that stuff. One thing that they can say about both Iraq and Afghanistan is that they are exhausted.
That's true.
The reputation of Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires, which I'm sure is something that you have heard 100 times before. And of course, the corruption. I guess if somebody is an outsider and there is corruption in Iraq, right? They say it's like, why should we care? It's always been corrupt. It is what the people there do for the thousands of years. What are we going to do to interfere to actually fix that from changing that?
Yeah, but the corruption will affect them because the money that these parties are gaining from corruption is going to fund maybe ISIS, maybe terrorist groups supporting Iran, or they are pro-Iran, they are attacking other countries, our neighbors, or attacking American bases inside Iraq. So corruption is doing so many things.
Exactly. The example of Afghanistan. 20 years in Afghanistan. USA.
I'm big like because I know that we have thousands of people watching us, but also the fact that I have met with a lot of officials and their first response. And actually, it's now. Who knows if Trump going to win the elections? But I'm guessing he will. The first thing is no Middle East wars and the intervention, all of that stuff. And the narrative is that we lost in Iraq and Afghanistan. Why should we care anymore? We've spent $3 trillion, I think, in Afghanistan and $4 in Iraq. And we got the Taliban replacing the Taliban. And we got an Iraqi prime minister who is like, I guess you can deal with, because he came to Washington, D.C. and he was welcomed by State Department officials. So he's obviously...
signed some paper.
He signed some... So he's like someone he looks like a human.
Yes.
He can walk, he has legs, he has hands.
I'm going back to Iraq, so be careful. He might sue me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, he looks, at least from the outside, he looks like a human, not an alien. So somebody that they can deal with. Yeah. And that's the argument that I've heard many times. It's like, oh, it's someone that we can deal with. Yes. He has embassies, he has a structure of a state. So it's like, might as well deal with the devil you know than the devil you don't know. What would you say to that?
I don't understand that idea about dealing with the devil we know rather than trying to deal with the new people. The problem is the liberal parties in Iraq are not good enough to represent Iraq internationally or to take more seats in Iraq. And we did a lot to help them 2 years ago and last year to train them.
We did, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the political competition inside Iraq, it's not fair because Iran proxies are getting paid from Iran and they are controlling the wealth in Iraq, and they play the game in different roles. So it's unfair to deal with them. But I think United States should change their mind and try to deal with different people which can be their allies, real ones, not dealing with a guy who's trying to show things and dealing with Iran behind the scenes. So
or change their tactics and change their strategies, because they've already failed in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Because it didn't work.
For the same reason. And they've already poured in billions of dollars in USAID funding and all the fundings that channeled up through other organizations like the UN and other organizations. And we saw how corrupt these regimes can get when you have that much money pouring into the country. We saw how much money could be stolen as easy as it was, and how easy it is to form a government on the surface that functions and works, and as you mentioned, has humans sitting on chairs. But then when push comes to shove, and when you find yourself in a desperate situation like we did on August 15th, when we had a president and a working, functioning government with all branches of the military working completely fine the day before, and all of them just completely vanishing on a single day. That this comes up, I think, towards corruption and towards, in a way, related to how the United States and the international community handled the situation in Afghanistan, through their development projects, through their helping the Afghan people, through pouring in money, but not asking enough questions in return, not checking where the money is actually going to go ahead and get spent in.
So what I'm hearing is that what you're saying is it's not that there was a problem. The way that the intervention happened was a problem, not the intervention itself.
Exactly.
So what would you propose as an alternative? Let's say you're now speaking to, I don't know if it's going to be Jared Kushner, but it's going to be somebody who's close to Jared Kushner who's going to be, okay, I'm now the Middle East advisor, I want to do something about Afghanistan. What would you tell him?
I think that's very difficult, considering how messed up the situation is at the moment in Afghanistan. We know that the Taliban that there's relative peace and stability in the country, but that's because, well, the terrorists that were killing us yesterday are now in power. It's like having somebody robbing you, and then the next day they're your friends. It's still the same thing. They're still a thief. They're still a robber. They still have blood on their hands. However, this apparent peace and stability does not completely showcase the full depth of what's going on in the country. We still have people getting disappeared. We still have killings. We still have beatings. We still have public trials and
women not able to education.
That's a completely whole different topic in itself. And then their discrimination against our ethnicities, and then their because they're mostly formed of one ethnicity, unfortunately, and then they tend not to share, they don't like to share power, even within their own ranks. So all of that combined makes this a very complex situation. But how you would advise the next president of the United States or the international community, I think this deserves a lot of research, a lot of in-depth research, and a lot of better minds than what I am suited for, quite honestly. But better people, in order to sit down and try to think strategically on how they can intervene in Afghanistan, but without actually the intervention part, without actually going in again through the invasion part, but helping the people who are already on the ground, who are already established themselves in the country, who are already fighting in the front lines. For example, the NRF is a prime example. We have people fighting all across in Afghanistan, but the media doesn't cover that because they have difficulty reaching out to the media. It's everything inside the country is censored heavily, and the Taliban will not allow any news of what's happening inside the country to come out. The NRF is just one example. There are many, many other militia groups inside and rebel groups inside Afghanistan who are actively fighting back the terror that the Taliban are causing the Afghan people. I think supporting these groups is one way, because no matter how hard we try to talk to the Taliban diplomatically, it's impossible to make them sit on a table and then have them sign a document or have them turn their eyes towards allowing women to go to school, for example, or allowing or sharing power with other ethnicities in the country. As much as we try, it's quite literally impossible to do so. They have fought for 20 years. They believe that they deserve this country right now. They believe that they are the rightful owners of this country right now in the people, because they've had shaheeds, and they've spilled blood, and their blood has been spilled. So they see themselves as rightful owners of this country right now, and leaders and rulers of this country. It's impossible to talk to them diplomatically and ask them to, hey, let's split power now with other people in the country, or have an election inside Afghanistan. It's quite literally impossible. The only way is to strengthen these rebel groups and militia groups inside Afghanistan who are able to fight from Afghanistan. We have thousands of soldiers still inside the country who does not want to sit still. They are still as prepared and as ready as they were before the fall of Afghanistan. We have thousands of soldiers inside it, in the U.S. The U.S. Carefully selected and shipped them right today, starting from today all the way until September 1st or August 31st, 2021, when the U.S. were taking all of these soldiers out of Afghanistan and then shipping them into the U.S. These are all reserve forces. We can still use them, and these people are all ready to go back and fight, because the only way is, I think, for me, is to start a military fight inside Afghanistan, a military approach, only through rebel forces and through militias inside Afghanistan, Afghans themselves, so that they can take charge of this, and at the same time continue their diplomatic approach as much as possible. But this could only work if we have some sort of proof that we still can have some sort of power in our hands. It's impossible to negotiate with somebody that has 100% territory in their hands. It's like going to a discussion table with no bargaining chip. It's impossible to talk to them. You still have to show power. You still have to show that you are capable of doing something so that you can talk to them, because that's how they turned the tables towards themselves. That's how they got into power right now. The Taliban came into power through suicide attacks. They came into power by blowing themselves up. They came into power through suicide vests and motorcycles, and then these homemade bombs that they used to make in these yellow plastic jars of some sort. That's how they took power. They didn't take power through B-2 bombers or B-52s or through tanks and heavy military equipment. Yeah, they had those things. I mean, not the B-2s, but they had some equipment with them. But they took power through suicide attackers. That's how they dominated the country. That's how they brought the Americans to sit at the table and talk to them. So I think the only approach would be to have some sort of internal resistance. And 3 years have passed already, and the people are very tired. They have witnessed that the country is not progressing in any direction. They have witnessed that, okay, the first year people were a little optimistic. They were like, okay, the Taliban may have changed. They might show some resolve. There might be some good stuff coming out of them. Maybe they've changed. It's been 24 years, 21 years at the time. Let's see what happens. And then we all saw that it's the same old propaganda. It's the same old scenario. No women allowed to go out.
What do you make of the argument that, like, again, I'm just mostly repeating what I hear because I really like what you guys think of this subject. But is Afghanistan really one country? I mean, many countries in the Middle East, including mine in Iraq, are mostly kind of, not to say made-up countries, but there are countries that kind of fluid, and that the borders are fluid to some extent. I mean, what do you make of one of the suggestions that I heard, even from Ahmed Massoud's foreign secretary, and he was mentioning, like, we should have a federalist system in Afghanistan in which the Pashtuns have the rulers, the Tajiks have the rulers, which is, I guess, is like the best common ground, is that you have a federalist system in which everybody, kind of like sort of what we have in Iraq with the Kurds, and they have the semi-autonomous region, where it's kind of Iraq, but not really, but it's still Iraq. And do you see that even possible in which Afghanistan can become a federalist country, or do you think it is more likely that Afghanistan will have kind of separate territories, the same way Iraq is divided into Kurdistan, Iraq, which has its own flag and it has its own parliament and it has, and to some, I mean, at the moment they're under one country, but they also had an election in 2017 that they wanted to separate. So it's like the relationship is kind of murky. I think the Kurds, the moment they're going to get enough support, they will leave. They're not going to stay in Iraq. But the thing is, like, do you see that possibly in which like Tajik part of Afghanistan become part of Tajikistan or become its own country, and then the Pashtuns have their own country? Do you see that even possible as the solution to Afghanistan?
At the end of the day, the issue was never with the people themselves. The people never wanted this hatred against other ethnicities. The amount of hatred. Okay, there will always be good Pashtuns and bad Pashtuns. There will always be good Tajiks and bad Tajiks. No matter how hard you try, you will always find that. But at the end of the day, the progress that I'm talking about in the past 20 years has actually enabled us to come together as a nation. It was only at the top tiers of the government when you notice that because division is a powerful tool for politicians, and that's how they can stay in power sometimes. So they use that. So they always were interested in using division and adding and fueling hatred towards other ethnicities and towards other tribes, or Shias and Tajiks, Sunnis, and Hazaras, the minority. This was always used as a tactic by these politicians, all the way from top tier, from Ashraf Ghani to all the way down towards low tier politicians, in order to fuel their own agenda, in order to help their own cause. But when you came to the basis of the country, which was the nation, which was the people, you would rarely see these kind of hatred interactions with people. I went to a class filled with Tajiks and Pashtuns and Uzbeks and Hazara. My best friend is a Pashtun from Kandahar, from where Mullah Omar was, the leader of the Taliban. And we are both secular and liberal thinking people who've been together for 10 years now. And the same goes for all of my other best friends now. We sat together, we've had parties together countless times in Afghanistan and abroad with people of different ethnicities. At the core, at the base of the country, you don't see that much hatred. You only see people coming in together.
I do want to ask Wameedh the same question about, like, there was this guy, I think, what's his name, Sufyan al-Samarai or something, who was calling for a separate Sunni federal, like a separate Sunni provinces, kind of like, because I think in the Iraqi constitution there is this thing about if 3 provinces join together. Actually, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but like something like that. If 3 provinces form together and they said they want to be separate, they have the ability to do that.
Yes.
Do you see that happening to Iraq as well? In which, the Kurds already have theirs.
Yes.
You have the Sunnis who have 3 provinces, I think, or more, 4 provinces. Do you see that possible, in which Iraq will also be divided into 3, like Shi'istan, Sunnistan, I guess, and Kurdistan, if that's a better, or do you see that the movement from Tishreen and which is from the south mostly, do you see it uniting, like that Iraq would actually remain Iraq as we know it, from Basra to Zakho?
Yeah. So the situation in Iraq, it's not ideal, but it's not that bad. So the problem is when you don't have a real war or real problems, you can't divide your country. And the problem is if you divide this country into provinces or to like confederations or whatever, confederacies.
Confederacies.
Yeah. So this will be a threat to our neighbors, because Saudi Arabia will be very close to the Sunni confederation, and Iran will be close to the Shi'i part, and all of our neighbors will take some part of Iraq. So I don't think this will be a good idea for now, but if the situation is going to be bad, I think this is a good idea at that time. But nowadays, we don't need that. We need only to have our own will to decide what we need. We need to get rid of the Iranian influence, and that's only our problem. We don't have so many problems to solve. Our economy is not really bad, not the best economy, but it's a good economy. Until now, it's a good economy. We are selling more than $100 billion oil, and also the.
But don't you see that, I mean, as a problem in which, as a country, we are so dependent on oil to the way that there is no, like if, I mean, Saudi and Emirat and everybody has a 2030 plan and has a diversification from oil. We have nothing.
Yeah.
So like 2030 might happen, and oil will be, I mean, oil will always going to be used, but
Yes.
but we have zero plan
Of
whatsoever in the next
Because
6 years
our
of what we're going to do with that oil.
Iraq is a new country. Iraq is, after 2003, it's a different country than Iraq in 2003 and before. So different country need to start from scratch to build infrastructure, to build ministries, to build real democracy. Now we are losing our democracy. We need to maintain this democracy, and we need to learn from this experience to build a more realistic democracy and to build the country.
So, which is how can we build a realistic democracy? I mean, that's your field.
Yeah, so we need to build a real parties, believing in Iraq, and don't think about funding only and trying to survive. It's not only about that. We need to do some think tanks and do a sustainable thoughts, not only using funds to do businesses and do some political parties, and that's it. And I think if we have weaker neighbors, we will have a stronger government. This is what's happening now, because Iraq is very.
And by weaker neighbors, just mean weak Iran, right? Like, I don't think it's neighbors, just one neighbor.
Yeah.
That is the problem.
Yeah.
I think at the moment, at least.
Yes. At the moment, yeah, of course.
But I mean, I guess now is 21 years after the war. The U.S. bases are still being attacked. I mean, I think 2 days ago they attacked one in Anbar province. Do you see that remaining an issue in which the militias continue to attack bases? And
Is it a real problem? When the last time did American soldier died by these attacks?
well, I mean, it's a real problem when your bases get bombed. I think from
But-
a U.S. perspective.
Yeah, but when did the last soldier killed by these attacks? No one got killed.
That is all based on, I guess, the theory or a conspiracy theory, whatever you call it, is that actually Iran tells the Americans before they attack, and then
Trump said that.
and then
I'm not
they
telling that.
they
I'm not
reduce
saying that.
they reduce the casualties. But it's still a great sign of instability when a non-state actor fires rockets in the middle of the day.
Yeah, we need
I
to
mean,
consider it as a fireworks.
Because the thing is, like, I guess the issue is that, I mean, this technically is not normal.
Yeah,
When
of
you
course.
have 50 states inside one country, like there is no actual. I mean, we think of Iraq because when you think of a concept of a nation state, you think of a country that has a military and has a police force and it has all of that. At least from the outside, Iraq doesn't look like a country.
Yes.
It looks like it's 50 countries that all hate each other somehow, which are all funded by the same group, but still. And wouldn't that also make the case of maybe if the country becomes more, I mean, will this country survive? I mean, that's actually the question, is that, do you think Iraq as Iraq, the one we grew up in at least, do you think this country will survive the next 20 years as it is right now?
So let's go back 3 years and take a look on Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia used to be independent, depend on oil only, and they did not do anything about their economy. But nowadays, after
MBS and the
after
2030
MBS,
plan and everything.
so
yeah.
everything changed. I think Iraq is the same thing too. It's possible to have a point to start from, and it's not now, but
But Saudi Arabia had a point to start from. Mohammed bin Salman is from the Saudi royal family.
yeah.
So he's a descendant of the royal family that ruled Saudi Arabia for 100 plus years. How are we going to do that in Iraq? We're not going to import Mohammed bin Salman.
No, we will not. We can't copy this experience, but we have our own experience, which is we live under a democratic country and democratic way to put a government and to put the parliamentaries. So we have a way to deal with that. We need to increase the numbers of voters and to let the people which are sleeping at their homes when the elections are coming, so they need to vote. Most of secular people in Iraq, they don't believe in voting.
How much was the 12% of the people voted in the last election, right?
It was like 19%, but
19%.
the government said it is 40%, but it was a big lie because they gave numbers, and 9 million out of 42 million, it's nothing. And it's not 9, it was 8.6 million. They wanted to vote, and the adults in Iraq are almost 28 million. So if you do some calculations, there was not more than 20% who went to vote.
So I mean, technically, what you're suggesting is trying to activate people to believe in democracy, number one, and to participate, especially the liberal kind of Iraq, which I think is increasing, which we actually talk a lot in our organization for those who are interested. So if these people get activated and they vote in the next election, which is 2025, hopefully we will get a more prosperous. Well, that's a positive note. So maybe we should end there, so that way we don't go to the negative notes. I mean, is there something positive about Afghanistan before we end? Where do you find hope in Afghanistan?
I think I find hope in the people's will to fight back and push back against the Taliban atrocities in the country. I think I find hope in the Afghan women who are actively protesting on the ground despite all the torture.
Many of them are featured in this book of ours.
That is featured on this book of ours from IBB, and I think the Afghan women have become a beacon of hope for everybody outside the country and for inside the country. They similar to what's happening in Iran with Zindagi Azadi movement that started I think a year ago or more than a year ago. The same way I think the women in Afghanistan are actually carrying out the bulk of this burden on our shoulders. But then at the same time, we have to be there as a supporting, as a support and as assistance for our brave sisters and mothers inside the country. And I think through the help of our organizations like ours and folks like you guys who've participated here today and people around the world who believe in freedom, who actually believes in liberty and freedom for all, who share these common goals and share values, through the help of such people, we are going to be able to push our governments, push our politicians, no matter where we are in Canada, the US, Europe, in order to force them into adopting resolutions and laws and regulations that benefit the people of Afghanistan, not just the state in Afghanistan, not just the previous government in Afghanistan, definitely not the ex-politicians in Afghanistan, and 100% the people of Afghanistan, the women in Afghanistan. And I think it starts with everybody around the world and on the basic level. Your senators, you can push your senators into into going to the Senate for a resolution that's going to benefit Afghan people, or you can ask your statesman or somebody at the lower level, donate to organizations who are doing amazing job inside the country, and support the cause by and through this digital age right now, just a share, a like, a comment can even go a long way for people inside the country. I think those are some basic ways that people can help. And then on a much broader spectrum, of course, we need more money, but we need money in a responsible way. So we actually know who we are targeting, so we actually know where we're going to spend, and we actually try to develop the country from inside out, but in a way that hasn't been done in the past 20 years, in a way where it's efficient, where it's effective, and where actually things get done, instead of money getting spent on nice and fancy cars and apartments in Dubai.
I mean, I would say before we end, I mean, that's, if you guys have the book, in page 2, we suggest a model for international development, which was actually, I would say, not necessarily our model. It was a model suggested by Tyler Cowen, who is a professor of economics at George Mason University, and really kind of to summarize the model, which is kind of the subject of this book, is that instead of building entire overhead and grant officers and bureaucracies, which eventually what was the case in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think there was this, I don't know if it was a rumor, but a fact, but it really kind of exemplifies the situation, is that in one of the Yazidi camps in northern Iraq, it reached a point where there are more employees than there are refugees. So in a way that this bureaucracy kept building up of grant officer hiring employee, hiring contractor, hires an employee, and then eventually end up with, so let's say if the United Nations give $10 million, maybe $8 million go to salaries and eventually go to departments in Dubai. Yes. And so in a way, and then only 2 million goes to the actual recipients, or the people who are the beneficiaries. So Tyler Cowen, who is a professor of economics at George Mason, and he also has this amazing blog called The Marginal Revolution. And he said we should have flipped the system on its head. Is that instead of giving 20 million or 20% to the people, we should actually give 80% and also put 20% on overhead. And that's really by vetting the people and making sure that the money is going to the right place. And then through diversifying the funds by investing in 100 companies, of course some of them going to fail, but in the grand scheme of things, he found that this model actually ended up being more beneficial to the local population than the whole AIDA program of the UNDP and the US AIDA program. And I think with Canada, they have GAC, which is Global Affairs Canada, and some others. And he found that there's a massive difference between these two models of, it's more risk-taking, because in a way you are actually trusting the people you are giving the money to, but it eventually, with the research that he did in his book and Stubborn Attachments and others, he found that this actually ends up creating far more jobs. Through our IBB a lot, we actually won an awards or a grant to do this program in the Middle East, and we created by now what 35,000 jobs by actually many of the businesses that we supported all across Iraq, Afghanistan, at these places. For those who are interested, you should check out the Untold Stories of the Middle East. And now, thank you both, Wameedh.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mansoor.
Thank you.
And thank you all for attending. And I think so I guess the priority should come to the live audience instead of the online audience. So anybody who has questions, please shoot them our way. And I will just make up an answer. I don't necessarily know the answer, but George?
Yes. I know the topic is fears under Taliban rule and the possible return of ISIS, but I think that as an organization here, maybe I think for many people who don't know about IBB, and you have the two coordinators for Iraq and Afghanistan, I think it's important to tell the story of what you have been doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. That is the first question. I'm going to tell you the second question, and then you take it from there. The second question is, and again to Mansoor, he wouldn't know because he's too young. But I wonder, from talking to kind of older Afghanis who he knows, who probably would be somehow adults in the 70s. How did the 20 years from 2001 to 2021, those 20 years with the Republic in control, how did it compare with the Afghanistan of the 70s and the 60s? Because we always see in social media pictures of how Kabul looked and how women in the 70s looked and so on. But the thing is, my understanding is that even in those 20 years after the civil war with the Soviets and after the internal civil wars after the Soviets were kicked out, there was never, it's like the 70s were only a mirage. So those are my two questions. Take them away.
So much, George.
Sure. So, I mean, we actually now just did our remarketing, so in terms of mission. So, Ideas Beyond Borders equips individuals and communities across the Middle East with information, skills, and resources to improve their societies on their own terms. What does that look like in practice? Our first program, which is our kind of our flagship program, is called the Beit al-Hikmah 2.0. So, Beit al-Hikmah is named after the Baghdad Beit al-Hikmah, which used to be a translation house of knowledge of the materials from Greece and Rome, etc., into Arabic and the languages in the region. So our program is the Beit al-Hikmah 2.0, which is to rejuvenate that era. At the beginning, we started with books, and we started with mostly enlightenment-oriented books from Steven Pinker, etc. But then the demand actually started growing in terms of not just books, but we built an entire media company or media platform that now has, so then we start acquiring different pages and partnering with different groups. We now have 8.5 million subscribers of people who watch our videos, our podcasts. We are a major partner of Wikipedia, so we have made by now 40,000 articles in English Wikipedia to Arabic, Farsi, Pashto, and Kurdish. And so that is the kind of, I would say, the digital space. And then slowly we start getting, and that's what actually explains our physical presence in Erbil and in Iraq, is that Wikipedia itself is owned by an organization called Wikimedia Foundation. And Wikimedia and Google partnered with us to actually start improving the translations for artificial intelligence for it to improve, and also to create Wikipedia in Arabic, which is a not really sustainable Wikipedia compared to other ones, for us to train university students all across Iraq, from the University of Mosul to University of Babel, etc., and Turath, to actually train the artificial intelligence also participate in the Wikipedia program. So that's how we started our physical presence. Then slowly we actually grew more than that. So now we've been around for 7 years. So I'll tell you the short story. So then we started doing the more on-the-ground activities because we have the registration. We're able to operate thanks to the PDK and our friends at the Kurdistan Region government. So we were able to open up so we started getting into the international development space, and we won this amazing grant and support for us to start what is called the Innovation Hub. And the Innovation Hub is our small grant model in which instead of us doing things, we support people who have the ideas to do things. So that's what we call the activation phase of Ideas Beyond Borders, that other than we just educate people about liberal ideas and science, etc., that if somebody wants to do a science workshop in Cairo, or he wants to do a critical thinking workshop in Najaf, which we have supported, then we will actually support these people. So that's what we call the activation. And we utilize the emergent ventures model. So instead of giving people big grants, not that we actually have big grants to give, but is that rather than giving people $10,000 or $50,000, we actually give them incremental amount of money or a small amount of money, and then through that we filter out who are the good doers and who are the bullshitters. And because in that international development nonprofit space, I think it's fair to say that 90% of the organizations are frauds in Iraq and Afghanistan. So everything you pretty much see of the Sustainable Development Fund is all bullshit. Most of them, they don't do anything. It's just workshops about events and all of that stuff. So we built up this model that really actually took off a lot, which is why after so many groups and businesses we have supported, we're like, okay, we're supporting all these amazing people. How about we all put them in a book? And that's what the book is about. So it's really the collection and all of that. However, that's a significant part of it is the business piece and the entrepreneurship piece. But Wameedh also can talk more about the fact that there was this political parties and movements popping up in the Middle East, which is also back to the action piece, in which we started supporting them. And that's both in Iraq and Lebanon, and any places where we see some hope for liberal coordination to happen. So we actually start supporting political parties, or not directly because the laws don't allow us to do that, but more into training them and giving them the capacity for them to advance. So that's really, in a nutshell, what IBB does. We have been around for 7 years, and we're now opening our registration in Baghdad, hopefully within the next couple months, maybe years, who knows with what bureaucracy, but we already have a registration in Erbil, in Kurdistan region, that allowed us to operate a lot in the Kurdistan region. We also have an office in Dubai, which allows us to actually support people in Egypt, to Mauritania, to everywhere, because Dubai is the financial capital of the Middle East. So if you send money to Dubai, you can send it to pretty much anywhere else. So through that, we're able to support some of our Egyptian translators to Lebanese business people. So Dubai is really our kind of backbone in terms of being able to get people supported, because it's hard to send money like from US to Iraq, but through Dubai, it's very, very easy. So we're very, very thankful to that. So that's the IBB in a nutshell. So Mansoor, if you can answer the Afghanistan question.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the second question was, how did the 20 years of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan compare with the Afghanistan of the 60s and the 70s? Well, obviously, I was not there to witness the 60s and the 70s, unfortunately, even though I really wanted to.
I thought the white hair came from somewhere.
It's just I'm just going bald. I'm very young. But obviously, I've heard of stories, and I've witnessed the accounts of what my dad has told me, and what my mom has told me, and what my grandma and grandpa has told me from the past. My grandfather was a general. He was in the military. On my dad's side, and from my mom's side, and then my dad's side were academic and busy with academic stuff. So both sides of the family were busy with something throughout this whole time and occupied with stuff during different regimes. If we go specifically to the 60s, the 50s and the 60s, this was during the reign of King Zahir Shah, and then later on his cousin, who overthrew the government and the monarchy actually, and then instated the first federal government in Afghanistan, a democratic republic, Daud Khan. He became the first president in Afghanistan. Eventually, later on, throughout the 70s, the Soviets took power. So even though with the turmoil and with a little bit of white coup d'etats happening here and there, overthrowing of the king and overthrowing the Democratic Republic by the Soviets and stuff like that happening, we still had relative calm and peace. But unfortunately, the one thing that I completely despise of the leaders of Afghanistan from the past 100 years and before is that they have never paid attention to the education of the public and to the development of rural areas. Afghanistan has been an amazingly beautiful country. It's amazingly beautiful. It's big, not as big as Canada or the US, of course, but it's big, and it's got a population of, right now it's about 40 million-ish, but back then 30 million to 35 million people. Within that population, only 300,000 to 400,000 people lived in the capital city of Kabul at the time. It is only during the past 20 years where we have seen 5-6 million people living in Kabul city now. So for the majority of time, Kabul, the main capital, the main center and hub in Afghanistan, has only had 300,000 people, the original people of Kabul. And then everybody else has been dispersed around in rural areas. And we've only seen development, and we've only seen these images that you were talking about, George, coming out of Kabul, coming out of Herat maybe, coming out of Mazar-e Sharif, coming out of a few centers of a few provinces and the capital city of Afghanistan. And then when you went to a few miles out of the city, you would see clay huts, and you would see people walking around with donkeys, with horses, and you would see that tribal ruler system of living for the people. And this has been one of the main issues. Nobody has paid attention to that. Nobody paved the way towards development in these other areas outside the city. It's always been just inside the city. And so whenever we had a political change in the country, especially under the time when obviously there was no internet and access to information was limited, and it was word of mouth to most people, and literacy rate was down to earth, so people only relied on other people, and people only relied on mosques and imams and masjids and places of worship where they could actually believe that the guy talking to me and where I'm praying with him has some sort of knowledge in his head. Those were the only methods of communication. So whenever a political change happened in Afghanistan, and then somebody stood up against this change, it was easy to go up to rural areas and recruit soldiers against this regime. That's how the Soviets started getting backlash by the people. It was the rural areas, people in farms and villages, who started to attack the Soviets and started to come out to the cities, and then eventually start this whole rebel movement. So I think, we saw good pictures. We know about all the amazing stuff that happened inside Kabul city, but unfortunately it was limited to Kabul city and a few other major cities inside Afghanistan. And as much as the images, as amazing as they are, it's still not the full picture. So the past 20 years, what we saw was that we saw an insertion of ideas, we saw an insertion of education. With all the challenges that we faced, we still saw a much bigger leap towards development and towards actually progress than in the past couple of decades before that. So I think that's why I think the U.S. intervention in Afghanistan was important and then different in a way than the Soviets.
You have a fan in the chat here, which I think is your cousin.
Oh no, she's my aunt.
She calls a great speech. So I guess you have a fan here, just
aunt.
like my mom thinks I'm beautiful. So next question, I guess.
He said the cornerstone of any state is citizenship. We don't have that in any Muslim or Arabic country.
Why do you think that?
We are divided along religious line, ethnicity line, color line, whatever line it is, but and sharing or federation didn't work. It didn't work in Lebanon. You have, the Druze, the Sunnis, and they have 10 years of civil war, and now they are going back again. And I think Iraq is not too far from that. That guy, Saddam Hussein, had the best opportunity in the world, because Iraq at that time has the biggest reserve, one of the biggest reserve in oil. Not only that, unlike the Gulf states, he has a very educated workforce, you know what I mean? And agriculture, okay? So this, but he was stupid. He killed 10,000 of Communist Party, Dawa Party. He bombed the Kurds with chemical weapons, the Halabja. Okay, and so he destroyed everything, and that's not only for Iraq, but for the whole area. Once these guys died, okay, you have power vacuum, okay, and that power vacuum most of the time, the Islamists will go and they will come and it will continue. It's a vicious cycle. Unfortunately, it is a vicious cycle that will continue. And Egypt is not too far from that. We used to have 20% of our population Christian, Copt. Okay, now it's down to I don't know. There's no statistics, because this is national security issue. I don't know anyway. So you don't know how many, but you can find 7, 8 million people from them are outside. Okay? So we are bringing same thing happened, you know.
Yes.
And all these atrocities that we have seen, this is a state in the civilization what happened to the Yazidi movement, you know. It's just terrible, you know. I could not believe that something like that could happen, but this is the stupidity of religion, right? That, they are applying, same like Israel, they are applying Sharia law. And by Sharia law, I don't understand what's happening. You might have to answer that to me. They don't want the female to go to university and become doctors. And at the same time, okay, they prevent them from going to a male doctor. So are they want to get rid of women altogether? I don't understand that, really.
But also at the same time, when they get sick, they also send their kids to get doctors in the West, which is one of the most ironic things ever, is that when they get sick, they send their kids to US, but then when the population gets sick, they don't allow them to get medical school, which is the... And I guess in Iraq, they banned alcohol, but they run alcohol through the black market, which is like a...
And we have legal bars and... yeah.
So that's also the irony of all ironies. But I mean, there are some, on the Yazidi side, I mean, there are some efforts now to kind of, which I guess is sometimes too little too late, but to rejuvenate, like support Yazidi businesses and try to get the bad. I mean, I think the stats were like 5% of Iraq used to be Christian, yes, and now it's 0.5%. So 4.5% of Iraq Christian population is no longer. They're probably in San Diego making kebabs. That's the joke about the Iraqi Christians. But or actually, they live close to here. They live in Sterling Heights in Michigan. And then there is a gas station by Dearborn that stops where the Christians live and when the Muslims live. So even in Michigan, they brought the same sectarianism that we have back in Iraq into Michigan. Any questions from here?
Thank you. So I have 2 questions actually. So first off, in short, how hopeful is Iraq when it comes to enforcing the rule of law? And I mean the rule of law, it encompasses both safety and at the same time really matters surrounding corruption and money laundering and things like that. This is one. Second question is how swift and easy it is to conduct business for Iraq towards better infrastructure, lifestyle in general for Iraqis. How hopeful are we on that side? And I guess the reason why I ask these 2 questions is because I think it sounds to me like these 2, they're the most common, let's say, the basic requirements for any nation to elevate its life. And for Iraqis, since they're already divided and there's a lot of like magnets surrounding, like each side is being attracted for cultural reasons, whatever, to Iran and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, I guess maybe the most common ground would be to elevate the economical level of the nation and on an individual level, per capita, so that they can look up to for a better life instead of trying to look up to another nation surrounding them, which is not necessarily in a great shape. So I think let's just call it a spade. Money is the only thing that attracts an individual and it unites people, and at the same time it's the only thing that would make people feel that they distinguish themselves regardless of the cultural commonalities between them and their neighbors. If they're well off or better off, if they think themselves looking in the mirror, oh, we're better off. We don't want to U-turn to a previous lifestyle of suffering because of the intervention left and right. So they will automatically from inside start detesting the past and look up for, look into a better future and try not to allow any of that happen. Because enforcing, army, when it comes to borders and when it comes to border forces and so on, and other proxies the governments have to intervene in Iraqi politics, this is not going to be resolved until I think the people from inside start feeling better off about themselves. And that happens when some business transactions and improvements can happen, lifestyle-wise, infrastructure-wise, when the rule of law is to some degree of decency employed and enforced without having to have an iron fist like another Saddam and say, like,
So you want to split it because I
Yeah,
can talk
I
about the
will-
business side and then you can
I
talk
will
about-
answer him in 10 or 15 words only. So in my opinion, the problem in Iraq, it's not people's problem, it's a political problem. And people in Iraq, they are good. They can get along with each other. There is no hate speech between Shia and Sunnah, between Christians and Muslims. It's all about politics. It's being played by big heads to get some benefits from these moves. And about businesses, we are doing so many things.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Iraq is two Iraqs, right? So starting this year, we're actually working on the business laws in Kurdistan region. And one of our goals is to make it takes 3 days to register a business instead of 3 months. Because most of the businesses in Kurdistan region are actually within the black market, they're informal economy. And when you're in the informal economy, you have no way to get grants, loans, nothing. So the Kurdistan government is actually moving towards more business-friendly environment for a lot of reasons. One of it is the cutting of the oil from Iraq. Every time there is a tension with the federal government, the government says no oil for you, cut the whole salaries. So they want to depend less on the Iraqi oil and the Iraqi economy. So as a result, they're moving towards a lot of privatization in the economy, and by default allowing for a larger private sector, allowing for investments, etc. They have an annual conference that we participate in called HITEX, which is in Erbil every year, that has a section called Invest in My Ideas. And then they bring in investors from Siemens and Samsung and all the other countries to invest in Kurdish businesses. So that's like, so the Kurdistan region is like slowly evolving on that front. Some of it is actually because of political reasons. I mean, most of the Kurdish population used to predominantly be left-wing and socialist. And then because of political pressures, they actually, because of Barzanis, they're moving more toward privatization to actually move away. The rest of Iraq is a very different story because the corruption is like so deep inside the system to the way that nobody wants to give more power to the people through the private sector. Most of the country actually is, at least based on the latest US sanctions, is that there is so much, the country is all a money laundering scheme. So like there is no actual, like everything is like,
All the businesses in Iraq nowadays, the big businesses like a big hotels, Rixos Hotel, Movenpick Hotel, whatever we have nowadays, we have a new brands, franchises from the Western world. They are opening inside Iraq. But the problem is the money is coming from corruption and from money laundering. And I think, in my opinion, we can't get rid of this money now because Iraqi economic system is depending on money laundering nowadays.
because it's very lives on very informal economy. And however, the Kurdistan region is definitely moving toward, in my opinion, towards a much more sustainable way, because now I mean, they already have a website where you can actually register a business online. And that's part of what's called the digital government of Kurdistan. You can register a business online, all of that stuff. And the thing that we're working on is the ease of registration, because there is still a lot of paperwork that you have to send to different ministries and all of that stuff, which can be definitely be much less. And then when the businesses get registered, then there is a much easier way for them to even accept payments. And but yeah, the rest of Iraq, I mean, that would be, which I think, I mean, it's with Kurdistan, I guess I'll give you a political answer also, is that it's much easier when you're dealing with a homogeneous group which has one language and one identity than you have the rest of Iraq, which has multiple identities and many different vision of what the country should be like. With the Kurds, they have their Kurds and they have differences with the POK and the PDK and the BKK and all of these different factions. But at least the ones in Iraq have one cohesive vision of what they want to be, which I think something that hopefully with increased citizenship and participation of democracy, we might have Iraqis who actually care about Iraq as a one cohesive country instead of different factions. We do have a couple of questions online, but I think there is definitely one about the elephant in the room, which everybody is talking about in the news. I might want to end with is how will the war between Israel and Iran affect Afghanistan? And actually, I might answer that question mainly because I spend 50 hours a day reading news and reading research. Is that I actually don't think there is going to be a war between Israel and Iran. I think that most of this is a show. Is that Iran is there's this joke which I don't necessarily like, but Iran is willing to fight Israel to the last Arab, which I think is definitely there is a lot of truth to that. So I think that Iran is going to exhaust every possible way to destabilize the region or fight Israel through Hezbollah and all of and Houthis and Asaib and all of the poker cards that she has across the region before doing anything confrontational to attack Tel Aviv or because Israel has 2,000 nuclear weapons, and I think that they would not hesitate to use them in Iran if they ever get attacked. So I think that Iran is definitely thinking 100 times before they attack Israel. Even the last attack, which was a couple of rockets, was literally we're gonna attack you at 9 p.m. We're gonna attack, every information about the attack was publicized to the world before they did the attack. What kind of attack is that? Yeah. That's like bullshit. So I think that they wanted to save face. They did something very similar with after the killing of Qasem Soleimani, when the U.S. killed the Iranian general, and then they shot a Ukrainian plane, which has nothing to do with everything because the rocket went somewhere else, and then they killed a lot of Ukrainians, and then they attacked, I think, the same base in Anbar, injured two
US military base.
Yeah, and so it's mostly going to be theatrical. So So I'm actually more. I mean, the question also relates to Iraq and Afghanistan. I think, unfortunately, Iraq is part of the proxy battle, so it's going to be, of course, affected. I don't think Iran has any influence over Afghanistan at the moment, so it might be very limited.
It might be limited to refugees and the immigrants, Afghan refugees. We have 2-3 million refugees in Iran, so this could cause a disturbance.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely it has, but I think in Iraq, we definitely we're gonna still have the continuous tension between some of the militias, but I don't think. I mean, it's unfortunate because if this is like another Cold War, this could take 20, 30 years. Who knows? Because none of them is going away anytime soon. So the thing is that that means that it's gonna take a very long time until things calm down between them. But there is supposedly negotiations happening right now in Doha between Iran, Hamas, Israel, and the U.S. So I'm guessing that maybe they will reach something. Last time they did not. So but some seem to be optimistic. So we'll see. But I think Iraq will be affected for sure. Afghanistan, not so much. And
if they're meeting in Doha, I don't think anything is going to come out of there.
Yeah, maybe they will need to do another UN meeting of a workshop about the workshop, discuss the workshop. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thanks for all of you who are watching online. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you,
Take care.